I'm Alice, 31, living in Portland, Oregon. If anyone ever asked whether I had loved my husband, I wouldn't hesitate to say I once loved him so deeply I forgot who I was. We met 8 years ago at an outdoor art event. Something I only stopped by for fun, and he was dragged to by his best friend because he was bored at home. Ethan wasn't the charming or polished type, but there was something about the way he mixed the wrong colors and chuckled, "Oops, accidental art disaster. I'll probably get kicked out early," that made me laugh. He felt easy to be around, unpretentious. We grabbed coffee after the event, and from a scattered conversation about colors and street art, grew a 5-year relationship that eventually led to marriage. I used to think love was enough. We moved in together, then held a small wedding with close friends in both families. But if I had known what was waiting ahead, maybe I would have stopped then, or at least thought harder about his family. My mother-in-law Lorraine is the kind of woman who believes women are born to serve. She never said it outright, but she made it clear in every sharp-eyed glance, every barbed comment. Like the first time I cooked dinner for Ethan's family, she tilted her head at the spaghetti I made and exhaled. "I guess these days you don't need to know how to cook to get married, huh?" Everyone laughed, except me. Every time I visited their house, Lorraine found something to criticize. Dust on my shoes, a strand of hair not straightened, or the dress I chose. Seems a bit bold for a wife, doesn't it? Ethan would shrug, give a sheepish smile and whisper, "She's always like that. Don't take it personally." But if someone tells me to not take it personally while being insulted in my own home, I'm sorry, I don't agree. Lorraine believes in a traditional version of marriage. Wife stays home, husband leads, men shouldn't be bossed around or nagged. She once saw me working on my laptop and shook her head. "Doesn't matter how good you are at work if you can't take care of your husband." And Ethan? He used to talk to me nonstop, sharing everything from doodles to his boring work stories. But over the past 2 years, he started disappearing. Even while sitting right in front of me, his phone was always in his hand, his eyes dull. Whenever I asked him anything, the answer was always, "Up to you," or "Whatever you want." I tried sparking conversations, asked questions, begged him to make time for us, but all I got was distracted nods. Or worse, irritated looks, like I was a burden. When I said I felt abandoned in our marriage, he simply said, "You're overthinking it." Once, I broke down crying after dinner because his mother had insulted me in front of everyone. Ethan didn't defend me, didn't even say anything afterward, except a casual, "She didn't mean anything bad." He didn't need to yell or be cruel. His silence was cold enough to make me feel invisible. Things began to crack like that, slowly, quietly. No big blow-up, no screaming fights. Just a growing awareness that the man who once held my hand in the middle of a busy street now only held his phone, while I, his wife, had become a shadow in my own life. Our 4th wedding anniversary. I knew Ethan had forgotten or deliberately ignored it, but I still prepared. Not to hold on to anything, but to remind myself that I had tried. I spent all Saturday afternoon in our small kitchen, wrestling with the honey-roasted chicken recipe Ethan always mentioned from his childhood in Northern California. I had to text his mom, yes, Lorraine, for the recipe. She sent back exactly 7 words: chicken, honey, garlic, lemon. The rest? Whatever. Still, I did it. I went to Whole Foods, picked the best ingredients, polished the old wedding wine glasses, lit the scented candle Ethan once said smelled like August. I played our old acoustic playlist, the kind we used to listen to while dating. Everything felt like a final attempt to save something quietly falling apart. At 10 minutes to 7, I got a text. "Mom and Uncle Phil are stopping by. Forgot to tell you. Just a quick visit." I stared at the screen, his mom and Uncle Phil. "On our anniversary night," I texted back. "You mean tonight?" He simply replied, "Yeah, they live nearby, don't be upset, okay?" I set the phone down. Even if I was upset, who cared? Dinner wasn't finished yet, but my appetite had vanished. I kept going anyway, like a robot on autopilot. When the doorbell rang, I was already in the cream-colored dress Ethan once called his favorite. But when he walked in, his eyes didn't even pause. Lorraine walked straight into the house like she owned it, glanced at the table, then ran a finger across the kitchen counter, lips pressed tight. "You did all this yourself?" she asked flatly. "Hope you didn't use too much honey. Ethan had a mild allergy back then." Bill, Ethan's uncle, had already been drinking. He walked in with a bottle of red wine, laughing loudly. "Wow, Alice dressed up like she's expecting the president. Or is this a dish soap commercial?" I smiled tightly. I had learned to hold it in. Ethan didn't even look at me. He dropped his backpack on a chair, took off his coat and sat down, pulling out his phone like he was waiting on Uber Eats. Dinner started in strained silence. I tried making small talk, asked Lorraine about her rose garden, asked Phil about his fishing trip, but got only half-hearted replies and grunts. I served the chicken carefully, plating each portion with care. When I handed Ethan his, he took it without a glance, stabbed a piece with his fork, brought it to his mouth, and suddenly spat it out into a napkin. I froze. Bill burst into laughter. "Geez, Alice, trying out chemistry experiments in the kitchen? Serve that in a restaurant and you'll get sued." I didn't say a word. I just looked at Ethan. But his eyes held no remorse. Instead, he set down his fork and said loud enough for the whole table to hear, "Maybe if you actually listened to Mom once in a while, you'd know how to make a basic dish," she told me. "Marrying you was a mistake." Lorraine lowered her head to her plate like she was embarrassed, but not for me. She was worried Ethan was going too far. No words came out. What rose in my throat wasn't sorrow, it was something colder. It was a cold, rising fury in the back of my throat. Phil raised his glass and called out, "You should have married that redhead from last year. At least she knew when to shut up." I didn't hold back anymore. I set my napkin on the table and looked at Ethan. "You just buried this marriage with your own mouth, remember that?" I stood up, grabbed my phone and walked straight to the door. Behind me I heard Phil chuckle, "Uh-oh, we've got a tsunami coming." But I didn't stop. I just walked away like I knew exactly what I was leaving behind and that I would never return. I don't remember how long I walked after leaving the apartment that night. I just remember the cold, the tightness in my chest. But my eyes were dry. I didn't cry, no tears came. Maybe I'd trained myself too well to hold them back all those years beside Ethan. When I called my sister, Jenna, she asked just one question: "Did you bring your keys?" And when I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me, she said, "That's fine, come over. I've got tea waiting." She didn't need to ask what happened. She always knew before I said a word. I stayed at Jenna's tiny apartment in Northeast Portland. Well, not really slept. I tossed and turned on the couch all night, drifting in and out of vague dreams interrupted by my phone buzzing nonstop. Ethan. At first he sent messages, "Where are you?" Then, "I'm sorry, but you were wrong too." And, "Mom's upset, she thinks we need to sit down, like a family." Family? That word coming out of his mouth sounded more ridiculous than ever. A mother who constantly belittled me, a drunk uncle who commented on women's bodies, and a husband who spat out my cooking in front of them and called me a burden. Jenna told me to start making a list of what I needed to take back from the apartment. Whether or not you go back, your stuff is yours. Don't let them swallow that part too. So I started writing. The coffee machine I bought myself, the wool blanket I knitted last winter, books, sketch pads, picture frames, a few ceramic mugs I collected. As I wrote, I realized most of what I owned had been dissolved into the idea of us, when really, it had always been just them. That evening, Ethan called. This time I picked up. "Why aren't you answering my texts?" I said I was sorry. "What more do you want?" I asked, "Do you think that's enough?" He sighed, clearly annoyed. "Last night, it was just dinner, Alice." I let out a quiet laugh. "And you spat it out like I poisoned you." His voice tightened. "You're trying to make me the bad guy." "I don't have to try, you did that all by yourself." After that call, I blocked his number. Not forever, but long enough for me to think without being dragged back into false questions like, "Do you still love me?" or "Why can't you try for the family?" Jenna understood me better than anyone. She didn't push or pry, just handed me a cup of hot cocoa now and then, and let me sit in silence by the window. You're not the only one who's ever endured a lousy man, she said. But not everyone has the guts to walk away. A few days later, Lorraine sent me a message, a whole novel. In it were lines like, I know Ethan's not perfect, but marriage is about endurance. You walking out like that made the relatives talk. You should be more thoughtful and come back, stop embarrassing your husband. I didn't know whether to laugh or get angry, but I chose not to react. Any reply would only fuel the performance they were staging. I no longer wanted a part in that play. That night I opened my list again and added one more thing, the divorce paperwork, because I knew I'd never be ready if I waited for the right day. And when that day came, I wouldn't tiptoe or whisper. I'd reclaim everything, not just my belongings, but the peace they'd stolen from me for far too long. I texted Ethan on Tuesday morning. I'll be coming by this afternoon to pick up the rest of my things. Please don't be home. He replied with one word. Okay. But as soon as Jenna and I walked into the apartment, I knew I'd been naive. Lorraine was sitting squarely in the middle of the living room, legs crossed over the coffee table like she owned the place. She wore a cream cardigan, holding a cup of tea as if she were hosting a family reunion. Ethan stood in the kitchen corner, hands in his pockets, face stiff, eyes avoiding mine. I set down my bag. Before I could speak, Lorraine cut in. We need to talk. I gave a cold smile. I'm just here for my things. Jenna folded her arms, standing close. If this is an ambush, don't call it a family meeting. Lorraine raised an eyebrow, unmoved. Alice, I think you owe Ethan an apology. You hurt him. The whole family's been talking. That's not a small thing. Hurt him how? By walking out after he spat out the food I made? Or by not sitting there while Uncle Phil called me barely a real woman? Ethan clenched his jaw but said nothing. Lorraine set her tea down, her tone sharp as a blade. Regardless, you're an adult. You should know how to protect your husband's dignity. Jenna let out a disgusted laugh. Dignity? Since when does dignity mean stomping on someone else? I turned to Lorraine. Do you know what the most insulting part of that night was? It wasn't Phil's words. It wasn't the way you've looked at me like I'm a thorn in your side for years. It was Ethan, the man I once loved, sitting there and saying nothing to defend me. Ethan finally spoke, his voice shaky. You're blowing this out of proportion. I met his gaze. No, I'm making it clear. In this very house I was treated like a stranger. You say I embarrassed the family? No, you weren't quiet out of kindness, and that silence, that cowardice, was the most shameful part. Lorraine shook her head, her voice soft but still poisonous. Sweetheart, women need to learn how to sacrifice. Marriage isn't about who's right or wrong. I tightened my grip on my bag and stood up straight. I've sacrificed plenty. I've stayed quiet, lived by everyone else's rules. But sacrifice doesn't mean erasing yourself. No one gets to demand my silence after humiliating me, especially when I'm the one left cleaning up after people who think they're always right. Lorraine's face flushed red. She shot to her feet. Don't be disrespectful. I'm your mother-in-law. Jenna stepped forward. And Alice is my sister. If you dare say one more insulting word, I won't be so polite next time. Not a sound followed. I turned to look at Ethan one last time. You had your chance to speak up, but you didn't. Don't expect me to keep living like someone without a voice. I walked into the bedroom and started packing the last of my things. It wasn't much, just a few books, a box of paints, a wool blanket, some items I once bought thinking they'd be part of a shared home. Now I just wanted to leave as quickly as possible. Lorraine was still standing in the middle of the room, muttering something to Ethan that I didn't bother to listen to. I shoved everything into my suitcase without trying to make it neat. Jenna came in to help. You don't owe anyone an explanation, she said. They're not worth justifying anything to. As I rolled the suitcase toward the door, Ethan spoke up one last time. You'll regret this. I turned around, voice steady. No, I regret not leaving sooner. We walked out of that apartment, the door closed behind us with no goodbyes. Just the sound of suitcase wheels rolling down the hallway and a deep breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding in. I returned to the apartment on a cloudy Friday morning, my mind heavy but my hands steady. Ethan had agreed not to be there. There would be no more conversations. only belongings to gather and a period to place at the end of this chapter. I brought 2 suitcases and a large yellow envelope. The apartment was strangely quiet. No familiar coffee smell, no soft hum of the washing machine in the kitchen corner. Everything felt like a hollow shell. Just like our marriage. Calm on the surface but rotted out from the inside long ago. I packed the rest without a word. The party dress I wore on his 3rd birthday, the glassware I bought during our Oregon coast trip, where Ethan once said, "If we ever have a kid, I want them born here." Those things were now just props from an old play I no longer acted in. On the coffee table I placed the divorce papers. Every page was filled out and signed. I wasn't trying to be dramatic, I just wanted clarity. One last message with no shouting or debate, just a reminder, so when Ethan tries to twist the past later, he won't forget the way he destroyed everything himself. I locked the door, dropped the keys into a small envelope, and left it next to the paperwork. 3 hours later my phone buzzed. Ethan was calling. I didn't answer. 5 minutes after that, 2 more calls, then a message. "What the hell did you just do?" I flipped the phone face down on the table. Nothing in those messages was worth hearing. No more "I'm sorry," "Don't blow this up," or "We can still fix this." That evening, Jenna and I ate cold pizza and rewatched old Netflix episodes. Halfway through the second one, my phone lit up again. "I didn't think you'd actually go through with it. People are asking me what happened. You happy now? You're making me look like I abandoned my family." I didn't reply, but Jenna did. She glanced at the screen and muttered, "If that's what family looked like, quiet suffering and swallowed pride, then yes, you did the right thing." The next day, Ethan began posting cryptic updates on social media. His profile picture changed to black and white. His bio now read, "Loyalty is rare in this day and age." I got screenshots from a few acquaintances. One old friend messaged me, "Are you okay? Ethan seems really torn up." I replied with just one line, "I'm fine. He's only upset about losing control, not about losing me." A day later, I got an email from his mother, Lorraine. "I didn't think you'd be this cold. Ethan hasn't been eating or sleeping. The whole family is talking. You should rethink this. A good wife knows how to preserve a marriage, not destroy it over one misunderstanding." I left it unanswered, but I saved it. Because I knew I might need it. That no matter how far I walked, they would always try to pull me back to the place where I used to feel suffocated. A week later, my lawyer submitted the papers to the court. Everything began moving through official channels. Ethan kept calling. Sometimes he left voice messages. Some sounded gentle. "Alice, I'm sorry." Others turned sharp. "What are you doing? Are you trying to ruin me?" I had once been afraid. I had doubted myself. I'd wondered if I was being too harsh. But every time I remembered Ethan's vacant eyes when I walked out, Phil's mocking laughter, or Lorraine's "women must sacrifice" like a sentence, I felt peace in my decision to leave. I hesitated for 2 days before replying to Nancy's message. "My birthday's still happening. I'm inviting you. Ethan will be there too. I can't uninvite anyone in a shared group. But I promise if anything feels off, I'll shut it down." Nancy wasn't the type to take sides easily, but she never hid her disappointment in how Ethan treated me. I trusted Nancy, but I didn't trust Ethan, and certainly not Uncle Phil. In the end, I went. Not because I wanted to see them, but because I was tired of avoiding things. If I could stand in front of Lorraine without flinching, then I had no reason to bow my head at a birthday party. I arrived a little late. Nancy rushed out to greet me, pulling me into a tight hug. "You came. You look different. Not like before." I smiled, not denying it. The party flowed as usual, at least for the first 30 minutes. I chatted with a few old acquaintances, avoided curious glances. But then, amid the laughter and conversation, I heard a voice behind me I couldn't mistake. It's hard to keep a family together when someone only knows how to run. I turned around. Ethan stood among our old friends, beer in hand, wearing the face of a performer. He was telling a story. And it wasn't the truth. I tried to talk, I even sent handwritten letters, but she didn't respond. I've made mistakes, I know. But who's perfect in marriage? Someone in the group tilted their head at me. I could see the unspoken question, "Did you really leave your husband over one fight?" I let the noise fade, set my drink down carefully, and walked into their circle. Uninvited, but unshaken. Nancy saw me and tried to speak, but I gestured. Let me. I looked Ethan in the eye. You want to tell a story? Then tell the whole thing. The story is, on our wedding anniversary, I cooked his favorite dish, decorated the table, lit candles, only to be treated like a joke. I turned to everyone. Ethan spat the food into a napkin in front of his mom and uncle, then told me I was the biggest mistake of his life. After that, his uncle, the same one who once called me barely a woman, laughed like I was some cheap sitcom. A woman in the room whispered, "Oh my God!" Ethan stepped forward, trying to interrupt. "Alice, that's enough. Don't act like you're innocent." I didn't back down. I'm not innocent, but I'm not pretending either. You want to look like the victim, but if being a victim means stepping on someone else, it's not worth it. Uncle Phil, just as I feared, suddenly chimed in. "Oh, come on, everyone lighten up. We were just joking. Alice has always been overly sensitive." I looked him straight in the eyes. You know what's not funny? When a woman is insulted in her own home, and her husband and in-laws sit there, saying nothing, as if it doesn't matter. Phil raised an eyebrow, stepped forward, his voice sharp. "You're still bitter about that? You should be grateful Ethan still cares." "I don't need you to define the word care," I said clearly without raising my voice. Right then Nancy stepped in, placing herself between me and Phil. "No one here is allowed to speak to Alice like that, verbally or otherwise. Phil, if you say one more thing like that, I'll call the police, and you know I mean it." Phil froze, then grumbled and stepped back, muttering something no one cared to hear. He looked like a statue in the middle of the chaos, struck dumb, completely still. I said my last words short and firm. "You say I left over one angry night. The truth is I left after 6 years of silence, of dismissal, of disrespect. And I don't regret it." Fuab. I turned and walked out of the party, head high, footsteps steady. As the door closed behind me, I heard someone whisper, "I can't believe he really did that." I didn't look back. Because I knew, this time, I had reclaimed my voice. 1 week after Nancy's birthday party, I signed the papers to officially remove my name from the old apartment lease. The landlord only asked one question, "Everything okay?" I didn't need to say more. I moved into a small room in the Selwood neighborhood, not big, not fancy, but sunlight streamed through the window each morning and it felt like a true beginning. For the first time in years, I could eat breakfast without judgmental glances or sighs heavy with hidden meanings. I could leave dishes overnight without complaints. I played music at midnight, read until dawn, and no one gave me that quiet judgment I'd grown so used to. The phone still rang a few times during that first week. Ethan's name popped up, then disappeared. Sometimes it was no caller ID. I assumed it was his mother. I didn't answer. One Monday afternoon, I got an email from an unfamiliar address. I opened it and saw a familiar tone. "You need to understand that marriage is a process. No one's perfect, not even Ethan. But getting divorced over a failed dinner is shallow. I just hope you reconsider." I didn't need to read further to know it was Lorraine. She still thought this was about a moment of emotion, still believed I was the problem for not biting my tongue one more time. I hit block, no hesitation. Ethan kept using social media as a halfway tool for guilt trips. His profile picture changed from black and white to a moody landscape. His latest status read, "Some people always walk away when things get hard. I'm not one of them." A few mutual friends sent me screenshots. "Thought you should know what he's saying," they said. Some of his people quietly unfollowed me. Others messaged, half concerned, half fishing for drama. "You okay? Ethan said you blew up over nothing. We just can't believe it ended so fast." I didn't get angry. They didn't live in that apartment. They didn't hear the slow drip sarcasm every day. They didn't witness the cold silence that ate away at a woman who once loved with everything. I simply replied, "I don't need them to believe me, I just need to believe myself." In contrast, some old friends, ones I hadn't heard from in years, started showing up again. Michelle, a college friend, called. "I saw one of Ethan's posts and just had to ask where you were. I'm glad you left." We met for coffee after 4 years apart. The conversation lasted over 3 hours. No mention of Ethan, no talk of divorce, just me, new, whole, and free. Ah, new fan me. Jenna was always there. Every morning she brought me coffee and quietly set it on my desk. One day she said, "Honestly, I think you should write all this into a book." I laughed. "I'm not that good a writer." She winked. "Just be honest. People will read it. I don't know if I'll ever write it. But I know I won't hold my voice back again. I'm not going to pretend everything is perfectly over. I still see Ethan's name in Facebook suggestions. I still flinch when someone familiar passes by a cafe window. But that feeling now isn't fear. It's awareness. The awareness that I survived things I once thought would break me. I didn't leave that marriage to teach anyone a lesson. I left because I'd had enough. Enough of the disdain, the polite suppression, the quiet nights beside a man who believed his silence was power. I once thought compromise could save something. But the more I stayed, the more I realized the only thing I was holding on to wasn't love. It was fear. Fear of being seen as a failure, of being labeled a quitter, of hearing his mother say I didn't know how to sacrifice for family. I lived in that fear too long. And then one day I sat with a cup of lukewarm tea in my new room, sunlight pouring through the window, and I realized there was no one left to command me. No more Lorraine with her rules disguised as love. No more Phil with his condescending laughter. No more Ethan with his vacant face and eyes that always looked away when I needed kindness. I know some people will hear my story and say, she just wanted revenge. Maybe they think me standing up, speaking out, exposing Ethan's lies was for satisfaction, but the truth is, it wasn't. I don't need anyone to hurt on my behalf. I just need them, Ethan, Lorraine, Phil, to witness the consequences of treating someone's dignity as disposable. They lived too long believing women will always stay silent, stay small, stay for the kids, for the husband, for reputation. Not me. And if someday when Ethan sees that divorce paper on the table and remembers the dinner where he spat out my cooking, if it suddenly hits him that some things once broken never heal, then that's just a bonus. A bonus I didn't seek, but I won't reject either. I used to be the kind of woman who tried to please everyone, even when I was running on empty. But today I choose to live differently. There was no affair, no shocking betrayal that led to divorce. Just 1,000 small moments, indifference, passive jabs, silent neglect, that I gathered one by one until I made my final decision. If you're in a relationship that makes you feel smaller every day, afraid to speak, constantly apologizing for things you didn't do, then know this. You have the right to leave. You don't have to wait for someone to admit they were wrong. You don't need anyone's permission to let go. Freedom doesn't come from others. It begins the moment you stop making excuses for the person who's hurting you. I don't have a fairy tale ending. I don't have a new lover to heal the old wounds. I just have myself, a sunlit room, a few secondhand belongings, a hot cup of tea, and a peace I once thought I didn't deserve. And that, for once, felt like peace I didn't have to earn. What do you think of Alice's choice? What would you do in her situation? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to follow the channel for more stories about love, family, and quiet strength.